Tyler, perfect. All right, so thanks again, Tyler, and I appreciate everybody taking the time tonight and joining. So let me give a brief introduction about myself, and then we'll dive right into negotiating your salary and employment packages. So I have been a brother. I was initiated at Kent State University in 1992. Been around a long time. I think Shanda Gray has told me I've been to over 80 lead events presenting and 14 grand chapter congresses. So I've been a brother for a long time. I actually married a brother and have three dividends. I have an 18-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 15-year-old. So on the personal side, Delta Sigma Pi really means a lot to me. On the professional side, what I'd like to at least present is I am an owner of a company called Atwell. We are a real estate development consultant. And what that means is we help companies like residential developers or commercial developers with their projects nationwide. We work on, we've designed and permitted about 800 wind farms around the country. We work in the renewable energy space, as well as probably 500 solar facilities and the oil and gas. So real estate development, power and energy, and oil and gas are the markets that I'm in. We have 30 offices around the country and about 800 employees. And the reason I tell you that is I spent a lot of time in the hiring phase. We brought in 25 interns every year. We typically have about that amount, and we've hired 140 people this year alone. And so salary negotiation is a big part of my role in the organization, supporting all of corporate services. On the personal side, I've also written 3 books. My book is called How Hard Are You Knocking? And this is the only commercial I'm going to give. The book is designed to help college students and young professionals land their dream job after college. So how do you write resumes? How do you start a job search? How do you research urgent industries? What should you wear to an interview? How do you face an interview like a meal interview or a group interview or a face-to-face interview? How do you conduct those type of meetings? And ultimately, how do you negotiate your starting salary? Today, I want to talk about, for about 45 minutes, negotiating your starting salary. And that's what we're going to dive into. But if you do have questions about the book, I'd be happy to answer it. I gave this same talk about a month and a half ago, and there were probably 30 or 40 people on the call, and I had a lot of questions afterwards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with questions, and I'm going to start with my contact information. Tonight's session is designed to be interactive. I know Zoom and team calls are tough to be interactive. I am asking you to stay on mute until you're ready to ask a question. But if you'd like to forward a question to Tyler, by all means, forward a question to Tyler. Tyler will get it to me. But this is my contact information. If you have any questions following this call, I'm a brother. By all means, send me a copy of your resume, email me and ask me a lot of questions. That's my website for my company, outwellgroup.com. And then howhardaryouknocking.com is my book's website in case you're interested in maybe bringing me to the university to do a seminar after COVID or do virtual seminars. All right, without further ado, let's get started. I do want to remind you, take out a pad and a paper. I'm going to give you a lot of tips, and I'm going to talk about a lot of things like how do you research urgent industries, because all of this is going to play into negotiating your starting salary. And I'm going to talk about starting your negotiation from 2 perspectives. One is people just joining the workforce. How do you negotiate that first job? The second part that I'm going to talk about is how do you negotiate a salary if you've already been working? So if you've been working at a couple of years and you're going through performance reviews, how do you negotiate those salaries as well? I'm going to talk about both sides. But again, I can't reiterate enough. If you have questions, by all means, please ask. Chances are, if you have a question, multiple other people will have the same question. And then lastly, if you do want to have any questions after the call, this is my contact info. All right, so let's get started. So first, I want to talk about today's market. It is your market. It is the job seekers market more than the employer's market today. We need more workers. And you probably have heard a lot in the news, read in Wall Street Journal, read in any business publication, is that finding great employment is very, very tough. Finding good employees, finding even hourly workers are very, very tough. Every company out there has help wanted signs or we're hiring signs. It is absolutely a candidate's market, which means the negotiation is actually to your advantage at this point. So it is absolutely a candidate's market. And the reason being is we've gone through there's a lot of cyclicality in the job market. So we came out of the recession in 08, 09, and 2010. 2011 was a slow start, but 2012 to today has been gangbusters. And then COVID hit. And with COVID, a lot of companies shut down, a lot of companies closed their doors, a lot of companies went virtual. But when that happened, there were a lot of people that left the job market. In addition, there are a lot of people that left the job market to maybe pursue something else, or they're happy getting some of the governmental checks and governmental support. So it is a candidates market. It's a time that employers like mine need to find good workers. So that's the first thing I want to tell you. Number two about the market is that it is a market for urgent industries. And you're going to hear me talk a lot about urgent industries. When you start looking, designing your job search strategy, I want you to think about what are the urgent industries that are expected to grow next year or grow over the next 10 years. And the way I define urgent industry is companies or industries that are going to grow as a whole over the next 10 years. For instance, healthcare is an urgent industry. Mobile technology is an urgent industry because we're moving to 5G. EV technology or electric vehicle technology is a industry that's expected to grow. And I mentioned healthcare first because the reason healthcare is an urgent industry is you have a huge population, 31 million baby boomers starting to retire. And as they retire, every industry or every type of company that supports that generation is going to grow. For instance, hip replacements, knee replacements, pharmaceutical companies, senior living. So when I bring up healthcare, I don't mean doctors or nurses. I mean, every aspect of business is expected to grow that supports the healthcare industry. So what you want to do as a job seeker is identify what are the urgent industries. Now, an industry that's not urgent, just to give you an example, is a company that makes CDs. A company that makes the CD-ROM, as an example, is a dying industry. A company that prints a newspaper is a dying industry because everything's going digital. Blockbuster or movie rentals is a dying industry. So that's what I'm trying to give you a perspective of. You have industries that are going to shrink because of the advancements that we've made in technology, and you're going to have industries that are growing. You want to be part or look for a job in urgent industries because those are the industries that have the ability to pay more. Those are the industries that are willing to negotiate, and that's where the job market growth is going to be in urgent industries. So healthcare, mobile technology, EV technology, specialty manufacturing is expected to grow. Believe it or not, one industry that is expected to grow are the trades, plumbing and electrical. So if you're in a business major and you're interested in things like plumbing and electrical, believe it or not, the trades are expected to grow substantially over the next 10 years. And so if you owned a franchise, as an example, you would kill it in that market. All right, so those are examples of urgent industries. Number three, if you're going to negotiate a salary, you want to find a company that's growing. So part of salary negotiation is doing your due diligence, doing your research up front. Make sure you research the industry that you're going into and you understand that industry, and then make sure you understand the company and the products and the company where they have offices and the type of customers and clients and type of competitors that they have. So when you start looking for a job, as you're going through your job search strategy, urgent industries are important in growing companies. The last question or the last point that I want to bring is, what value do you bring to that company? And that's the question that we're going to ask, is when you're looking for a new job as an employer, I want to add you to my company. So I might hire you and pay you $65,000 a year. But if I'm paying you $65,000 a year, I want to get something in return. And so you have to be that something. You have to tell me the value that you're going to bring to my company. And that in turn will help you negotiate your starting salary. So the first question I'm going to ask in every candidate is, what industry do you want to work in? I've already covered the industry part. The reason the industry is so important is I would rather hire an accountant with a 2.8 GPA that's really interested in real estate than hire an accountant with a 4.0 GPA that's not really interested in real estate. Because in my industry, in my company, we are a real estate oriented company. We do land development consulting, residential consulting, and so on and so forth. And so finding a person that's interested in my industry is the first check. So when you start looking for a job, you figure out what industry you want to be in, then growing companies, and then what value do you bring? So here's my question. What value do you bring to a potential company? Are you a logical learner? Are you a quick learner? Do you deal with stress very easily? Are you a team-oriented person or an individual-oriented person? Do you work well in stressful environments? Do you deal well with conflict management or stress management? All of those are skills that you need to be able to articulate. Do you understand something about, if you're going into accounting or finance, do you understand Excel better than the competition? So you have to start thinking about the value that you bring to the company. And again, all of this is going to play into negotiating your starting salary. So the question is what value do you bring and what impact can you make to my company? And at the end of the day, no matter what kind of company you're going for, whether it's a nonprofit, a for-profit focused on private development, or a federally funded position, is they're looking to add value to fill that open position. You're going to face, on average, 2 of these interviews, potentially 4. And salary negotiation starts in the first interview. So the first interview that we're going to have is called a phone interview. And I'm going to do a phone interview because I want to screen you out. You have to understand, when I post a job, even though it is a candidate's market, when I post a job, I might get 200 resumes for that position. And what I ultimately want to do is I want to narrow that down. So I'm going to go through every resume. I'm going to research the qualifications that every candidate has. And I'm going to try to narrow it down to the top 20. And then we're going to do phone screens with the top 20. And I have a team of talent acquisition specialists. There are recruiters. And our recruiters are going to do a phone interview. And in that phone interview, it's going to last about 20 minutes to a half an hour. And I'm going to ask you a lot of questions in that phone interview. What industry do you want to work in? Why are you interviewing with Atwell, my company? What value do you bring to my company? Tell me a little bit about your experience as a Delta Sig. Tell me a little bit about your experience as a leader on campus. So those are all the questions I'm going to ask because I want to understand, why should I bring you in for a face-to-face interview? But once you answer those phone interviews, I'm going to ask you another question that I don't want you to answer. I'm going to ask you, how much, Lisa, for instance, how much do you want to make your first year? And what I want you to iterate, and this is what you should write down, is money is not my driver at this point. I'm not looking for a job just for compensation. I'm looking for a role and to understand the role and responsibility of the position. I'm interested in this industry. I've researched the top 10 firms in this industry. You're one of them, and I'd like to work for Atwell. So instead of answering the question, I'm looking for 40,000 or 50,000 or 60,000 a year, I want you to divert that question or that answer until the second or third interview. The reason being is, as a recruiter, I'm going to try to lock you in. So if you tell me in the first interview, Tim, thank you very much. I'm really interested in Atwell. I'm interested in the real estate industry, and I was really hoping to make $40,000 a year. Even if I'm willing to pay 50, if you're telling me you're going to make 40, I will pay you 40. So in the first question about compensation, just simply say, thank you very much for the question. Money is not my driver at this point. I really want to talk to a couple more people and learn a little bit more about the role, responsibilities. I want to understand your expectations. Could we talk about compensation in the second or third interview? And every recruiter will typically understand. If for some reason the recruiter pushes that they need an answer, you want to give them a $10,000 range. So I'm going to give you a couple of websites to look at here in the next couple of slides where you can research compensation ranges. But if you're interested, for instance, in making $55,000 a year, what I want you to do is give me a range. Since you've asked, I'm looking for $55,000 to $65,000 a year. See what I did? I gave a $10,000 range and I started where I wanted to be. So those are some little tricks in the first couple interviews. But everybody on this call tonight will have a phone interview, every one of you, because our job, we're trying to screen you out. Again, it's a formal interview. So treat it as such. Make sure you dress up for the face-to-face interview. Make sure you dress up for the Zoom call, or if it is a Zoom interview, make sure you dress up. Make sure your background is very professional. Don't have a restroom behind you. Don't have an unmade bed behind you. Don't have a dirty room behind you. Don't have wrinkled clothes on. Treat it, the phone interview, just like a normal interview. And if you have questions about that at the end, I can answer those. So if you do well in the phone interview, then we're going to move to a face-to-face. So in the face-to-face interview, it might be Zoom, given COVID, but in most cases now, a lot of states are starting to open up. So I'm going to do a face-to-face. So in the face-to-face interview, I'm going to bring you in and I'm going to meet you face-to-face. I might introduce you to a couple different people, but they're all one-on-one interviews. And I want you to treat it the same way. When they ask the question, how much do you want to make your first year? See, I'm still exploring positions. I'm still exploring roles and responsibilities. Can you tell me a little bit about the expectations for the role? Can you tell me a little bit about the budget you have for the role? What type of range does this position warrant in your organization? Those are totally fine. However, when you do get to the face-to-face, I'm going to give you some websites to visit. I would like you to have a little bit more detailed information on the salary ranges, and we'll go through that in a second. But a face-to-face is just what it is I want to meet you face-to-face. I want to see how well you get along with the team. I want to see everything from, is your first impression By the way, your first impression is made in the first 7 seconds. So when I meet you, the first 7 seconds, I'm going to get a sense for, are you professional? Did you take care of your clothes? Would you look good in front of a client? Meaning, would you look professional and represent our company well in front of a client? Now, those are the two most common interviews, a face-to-face interview and a phone interview. Now, some of you that are going into sales or positions that are customer facing, chances are you're going to have two additional interviews. You're going to do either a group interview, which is called a stress interview, which is where they might have 3 or 4 people in the room asking you questions at multiple times. They want to see how you interact. They want to see how you answer questions. They want to see how you act under pressure. So it's typically called a stress interview, but it's by design. They're trying to stress you out a little bit. My tip to you is just take your time, answer everybody's questions slowly, make sure eye contact with everybody in the room, critically important. And those of you that are going into sales, chances are they're going to take you to lunch or breakfast. I don't recommend doing dinner meetings. I think it could get confusing. I think there could be alcohol involved. I don't recommend dinner meetings if you can avoid it. My recommendation is typically lunch or breakfast meetings. But a meal interview is designed to see how you act in public. What are your manners? Are you sending food back? Do you order something that's hard to eat? And those are my tips. Eat something before you go so you're not starving. It is an interview. So eat something before you go so you're not staring at my meal. Take money with you just in case. If they don't pay, I'm not sure you want to work for that company, but if they ask you, bring money with you. Ask them what they recommend for lunch. So instead of saying what's good here, just say, hey, what do you recommend for lunch? They're going to recommend something, but most important, order something that's easy to eat. Use a knife and fork, chicken fingers, something like that, that's easy to eat. But again, they're looking at how you act in public. And so those of you that are in customer-facing positions, chances are you're going to have a meal interview of some sort. And all of these interviews will come up, compensation will come up. You can answer them the same way, but as you get a little deeper, as you get face-to-face, answering with a $10,000 range, a group interview, and a meal interview, you will answer the same way. And here's what the goal is of preparation for the interviews. You need to understand my company. You need to understand Atwell. How many offices do we have? What type of services do we offer? What type of clients do we have? What type of competitors do we have? Because again, although it's a candidates market, I want to make sure you've done your due diligence. All of this plays into successful negotiation of a salary. So understand the company, understand the position. When a recruiter calls you and asks you to come in for an interview, ask them to send you a position description. A position description is a document that highlights the roles and responsibilities of the job. Ask them to send it over to you. The more research and the more due diligence you can do ahead of time, the more prepared you are for the interview. And last thing is understand all aspects of the company. So here are some tools that I want to share. So first of all, these are salary negotiation tools. So salary.com as an example, you can go into salary.com and you can put in job title, you can put in location, you can put in how many years of experience, and those things are probably the 3 most common. What is the title of the job? Where is it located geographically? Because companies located in California will probably pay more for a salary because the cost of living is higher than they would in Des Moines, Iowa. So the idea is understand the location is number 1. Understand the job titles, number 2, where it fits in. And lastly is what kind of experience are they asking for? Now, here's the one thing I will tell you as Delta Sigs, is I actually believe as a Delta Sig, we actually leave college with experience. Granted, I hope all of you are getting internships and getting summer jobs and things of that nature. But even as a Delta Sig, I think we can use that experience as work experience. Think about it. You were an officer in the organization. You had to conduct meetings. You had to deal with conflict. You had to deal with motivating a group of brothers to do something. You had to deal with time management. You had to balance school with work. You had to balance school with being a Delta Sig. You know, every meeting for us was every Monday night. The only reason I remember that is it was during Monday Night Football. And so if you think about being a Delta Sig, what are the skills that transfer to a company? So even if the job position is asking for 1 or 2 years of experience, my perspective or my advice to you is at least chalk it up for 1 year experience, work experience as a Delta Sig, and give examples of things that we encountered with being a brother. But salary.com is a great website. You'll put in the job title, location, maybe it asks about industry and experience and education. Monster.com is another website. Indeed also has compensation analysis. Indeed also has a number of job postings. So one thing that you might find is a job posting similar to the job that you're going for. Pull some of those down off the internet. Pull those down and research the job description, research the compensation range, and make sure its location is consistent with where you want to go. So because that's going to differ. Be careful a little bit with .com information and anything you find on the web. Inevitably, I'm going to find a position that has my same job title that is paid twice as much as I'm paid, as an example. And all of you will find the same. Make sure it's industry specific. Make sure it's geographically specific and the job title's there. But that's a good resource. It's going to Indeed, pulling down a position description, and then looking at what other companies are posting, and they typically will give a compensation range on those postings. Dice is a great website for technical positions. So if you're going into the software or technical industry, Dice is great. So those are normal websites. Monster, Indeed, and Dice are typical websites to find jobs and job postings and compensation. Salary.com is a great tool for compensation ranges. They typically will give you a range for the compensation. And then lastly is your Career Center. Go to the Career Center at your school, ask them for the type of position descriptions and the range that is also common in this industry. In most cases, it's called broadbanding. And for instance, we hire a lot of engineers. So whenever I'm hiring an engineer, I might look at an engineer one with 2 years of experience, understands Civil 3D CAD, and is interested in real estate. So those are some of the qualifications that I have. I might find a compensation range of $45,000 to $55,000 a year in the geographic region where I'm looking. So that's the range that you typically want to communicate to an employer. I would recommend moving that range depending on where you want to be. So if your goal is to get to say 50 or 52, move it up to 50 or 52 on the low end and give a $10,000 range, as long as you're not going crazy. Don't come in and say, I'm looking for 75 grand a year, because then obviously that's outside the market. That's not something that we would ever pay an entry level person. So do your research with these websites. I'm going to stop right there. You guys can unmute. What questions do you have so far? I talked about industry, I talked about company, and I talked about tools that you can use to research range of compensation. What questions do you have? This is the interaction part where you ask a question and I will answer. All right, no worries. If you want to use the chat room, by all means, and Tyler, please interrupt if you do see a question. I can't always watch the chat in the questions, so please ask the questions if you can. And I will open it up broadly at the end of this. So now you've done that. Now here's the deal. There are two sides of negotiation, two strategies or two stages. So let's talk about entry-level job negotiation. You're right outside of college. There are two stages of negotiation. One is your base compensation. And your base compensation is, what am I going to pay you? That's on the offer letter. It's either an hourly or a salary position. And believe it or not, professional jobs out there actually pay hourly. But salary hourly, what is the wage that you're going to bring home? How often is that paid? Is it paid every week? Is it paid every month? Is it paid every 2 weeks? You need to understand that. Are there any types of bonuses that they're promising? Meaning, is there a signing bonus? I will tell you guys, signing bonuses are probably the easiest type of bonus to get when you're looking for a new job. For instance, you can even ask if you wanted to get to 55 grand a year and I'm offering you 50 and I'm not budging, and I'll give you some strategies in a second, and I'm not budging off of 50, you can ask, is there any possibility of getting a $1,500 signing bonus to help me with my move, to help me with relocation, whatever it may be? Is there a signing bonus? Is there a performance-based bonus? Meaning, is it compensation oriented around commissions? So if you're going into sales, is there something around performance, or is there an end of year profit-based bonus or an annual bonus? So that is pure compensation that you're going to bring home. Other compensation might be a car allowance, technology. Are they going to buy a laptop, buy you a cell phone? Is there a cell phone package that they're offering? Again, that's part of compensation that they're giving you that. Is there per diem? Per diem is where you have to travel for a job, and by traveling for that job, they're going to pay you per day. A lot of it's the construction industry or the real estate industry pays per diem, but that might come up in the job that you're looking for. Are there spot bonuses? Are there referral bonuses? If you refer somebody to the company, will they pay? For instance, at my company, for every referral that's a priority, we will pay you $5,000 for every hire. So if you bring somebody to the table, we hire them. After 90 days, you're paid $5,000. So I just gave you an example of pure compensation. Now, other types of compensation that I want to at least highlight is that there is healthcare. So you need to understand what's going to be your cost every month. There's premiums. So if you're getting medical care through Blue Cross Blue Shield, the company's going to pay a portion, you're going to pay a portion. For instance, in most cases, it's 70-30. I will pay 70% of your healthcare premiums, you pay 30. But 30 might be $200 a paycheck, 30 might be $75 a paycheck. So you need to understand what are the healthcare premiums that you might have to pay. Does the company pay for training or tuition reimbursement? Are they giving a 401k? 401k is a retirement plan, and are they matching dollars that you put in? For instance, we're at 50 cents on the dollar up to 4%. So other companies might match differently. Some companies do dollar for dollar up to 5%. So understanding how they match your 401k, vacation time is negotiable. Maybe it's a week, but they can give you a second week if need be. How do they do performance reviews? How does the onboarding process work? Meaning how do you start learning about the company? And last thing is the first year expectations. One question that I absolutely recommend you asking during the interview is ask them, what are your expectations of me in the first year? Is it revenue based? Is it client based? Is it research based? What are your expectations? All these things play into that starting salary, because they might say, if you hit a certain number, you're going to get a bonus, things of that nature. So when you're thinking about compensation, don't just think of compensation as being, I'm getting paid $55,000 a year and that's it. There's a lot of things that go into it. And as a company, I might keep you at 50, but be able to give you other perks like a signing bonus or an extra week of vacation. Here, in my mind, is the holy grail of negotiation. When you're negotiating, there's a couple things that I want to mention. First of all, try to negotiate over the phone. So as an example, as a recruiter, when I call you and I will say, Lisa, I'm going to use you again, or Megan, I'm going to use Megan. So Megan, thank you very much for the interview, and listen to the words I'm going to use. Megan, thank you very much for the time that you spent with Atwell. The team has really enjoyed meeting you. You've been a great candidate. We're really excited about bringing you on. In fact, listen closely. In fact, Megan, we already ordered your business cards. We ordered your laptop. We're getting the office ready to go. What I want to do is I want to pay you $50,000 a year. For the position that you're coming into, I'm going to pay you $50,000 a year. We're going to pay it every 2 weeks. And we're going to give you a $1,000 signing bonus. And I'm going to ask you to sign right then. And the reason I'm trying to ask you to sign right then is my goal is to close you. So you have to understand, recruiters have a job to close candidates. Meaning I might have, like right now, we have like 49 open positions. And so as we have 49 open positions, the recruiter's job is to close you and move on to the next one. So my goal is to close you and for you to say yes, for you to sign. Here's what I want you to say. Mr. Augustine, thank you very much for the offer. $50,000 is very generous. As you know, I've identified the top 10 firms in the industry I want to work in. Atwell is one of them, or whatever company you're going in. And I'm really interested in you working for your firm, so I appreciate the offer. Is there any way I could call you back in 2 days because I want to talk it over with my family? I don't care if you talk to the dog. I don't care if you talk to yourself. The goal is to get off the phone or out of that first negotiation and call them back, and that's going to give you more power. By you calling me back, all of a sudden, you actually have the upper hand. So as a candidate, what I want you to say when you call me back in 2 days, and make sure you call back in 2 days, is I want to say thank you very much again, Mr. Augustine. I really appreciate it. As you know, I've done a lot of research, and based on my research, and you want to use those words, based on my research, I was really hoping to get closer to 55 to 65. It's called the 10-10 rule. What you're doing there is you're negotiating 10% and providing a $10,000 range. So if I'm offering you 50 for all those math majors, 10% is $5,000. Come back and say, based on my research, and listen to the words I'm saying. I'm not demanding. I'm not being a jerk. I'm not being cocky. All you're simply saying is, based on my research, I was hoping to get closer. To 55 to 65. A couple of things are happening. By saying based on my research, the recruiter might think there's something out there that they didn't know. Like they might say, Megan, wow, she must be interviewing with other firms. They're offering her 55. I got to get closer to 55. So that's one reaction that they can do. But they don't know what's going on. But a 10% is pretty easy on an employer standpoint to negotiate. Most recruiters have a 10% window to give you. Now, here's their reaction. They're going to give you a couple different answers. They might say, no, Megan, I appreciate it. We're interviewing a couple people. We're hiring everybody at the same level. We need to hire you at 50 grand. You're going to hear words like team member equity. I need to keep it fair among the team. I really need to keep you at 50 grand a year. If that's the case, then Megan, I want you to come back and say, thank you very much. Is there any possibility of me having a 6-month compensation review with a performance review? So if I do everything you need me to do in 6 months, can I be re-reviewed? Can I be reviewed for a wage increase up to 55? Most recruiters, most employers will say yes, because I have nothing to lose. If you're interested in 55, I'm going to pay a 50. If I have to wait 6 months, you're going to outperform as hard as you can to make sure you get to that 55. I saved 5 grand for 6 months. And so it's a win-win. So that's one potential reaction, is they could say, yes, Megan, I will do that. We will lock you in for a 6-month wage review. Number 2, they could say, you know what, Megan, I'm not going to do that. I can't go to 55. I can go to 52.5. So you just made $2,500 just by saying, based on my research. So right out of the gate, they might meet you in the middle. They might go to 55. So all of those potential outcomes might be there. But if they don't go to the number that you're looking for, see if you can get a wage review in 6 months. If they meet you halfway, that's fantastic. If they can increase your signing bonus, maybe another $1,000. Now, here's the art of negotiation. You can't be a jerk and negotiate. I would tell you, if I get the sense that somebody is cocky or arrogant or is coming across as demanding, chances are I don't want to really negotiate with that person. But if you're honest and say, you know, I've done research, I'm interviewing with a couple other firms, just by saying you're interviewing with other firms gets me interested, because if I know that you're interested in one of my competitors, I want to hire you more than anything else. So by saying I've done my research, I was hoping to get closer to 55, chances are they're going to budge a little bit. So with that being said, questions about this strategy?
Again, please feel free to unmute and ask Tim directly, or pop something in the chat and I will make sure that Tim gets that question.
Okay, so let me just reiterate where we are. I asked you to think about, I told you a little bit about the job market. It is a candidate's job market. Companies are starting to grow. We're starting to pull out of the recession. Now that COVID's over, companies are going to start growing. There's still a little bit of a fear of inflation, but I think we're going to get past it. So companies need you, number 1. Number 2 is do your research as much as you can. And my goal is my recommendation is try to identify 5 to 10 target firms that you want to work for. Research every one of those firms. What kind of products, what kind of services, what kind of locations, what do they do in the organization, or what do they do in the industry? Call them and ask them for position descriptions, or go to the website and pull that down. A lot of the compensation-based information will be in that posting. Then once you start planning for your interviews, you're going to face a phone interview, a group interview, or a phone interview, a face-to-face, a group, and a meal interview. All of those have potential questions about comp. Then we talked about doing that research and now negotiating your starting salary, the 10-10 rule. Now let's talk about existing positions. So if it's not a new job for you and it's an existing position, and you want to say, listen, I've been working for this company for 3 years. I've gotten 3% every year, which is the cost of living. 3% is very common for companies. It's called the cost of living increase. Other parts of the country might give a little bit more, but to get a 3% increase every year is typically common. If you go up to a 4% or a 5%, typically it's performance-based, or you're changing roles, or you're changing responsibilities. So here's my suggestion if you're working for an organization and you want to talk about compensation. Number 1 is I would start scheduling regular meetings with your supervisor or your manager. What I want you to do is identify your manager and start understanding what their expectations of you are. My best recommendation is have breakfast with your manager. Ask them to go to breakfast. First of all, there's a bunch of science around this. To meet a busy executive, typically Tuesday mornings are the best time to do it. Everybody's digging out on Monday, so Monday's a bad time. Tuesday typically is the best time for a breakfast because you're now dug out starting your week. Wednesday's the hump day. Thursday and Friday, you're thinking about the weekend. So my recommendation is and I call it managing up. Go to your manager and say, would you be willing to have breakfast with me once a quarter? You want to do it every 3 to 4 months. Now, if that's too frequent for you, doing it twice a year is fine. But what I recommend is don't wait until your performance review. The problem that employees always have is they wait until they are reviewed by their employer. And typically that's annual. You get an annual review. My recommendation is you should take control of your career and manage up. So talk to your manager and say, would you be willing to meet me for breakfast? Let's meet at IHOP on Tuesday morning at 7:30. The other thing, everybody eats breakfast. It's easy to get up in the morning. And now, here's the one thing I'll tell you. I don't recommend happy hour meetings. I don't recommend anything that involves alcohol. I think it gets too flexible or too flamboyant. I think it's confusing for people. I think it puts you at risk. I don't recommend happy hour meetings or dinner meetings. I think a breakfast meeting is a safe meeting. Tuesday morning is a good time to do it. Bring money with you because you're going to pay. Another good thing about breakfast is that it's inexpensive. So if you offer the manager to go to breakfast and you're going to do it once a quarter or twice a year, say, listen, I want to have time to talk to you outside the office and I want to get to know you a little bit and understand your expectations. So bring money with you and have an agenda. And what this meeting is going to do, it's going to give you clarity and it's going to give your manager clarity. The best way to get a compensation increase is for the manager to know that you want a compensation increase. And if they don't know that, they can't read your mind. You might be killing it. You might be doing a great job. If you're being paid 60 grand a year and you want to be at 70, if you're not communicating those expectations, it's hard for managers to adapt. Here's the agenda that I think works well. It's called start, stop, continue. What I want you to do is you ask the manager, what do you want me to start doing that I'm not doing right now? So I'm in this role. What do you want me to start doing that I'm not doing right now? And make sure you're taking notes. What do you want me to stop doing that's irritating? You know that they have a pet peeve. Maybe every time there's a meeting, it starts at 8 o'clock and you're in the office at 8:05. Maybe that's one of their pet peeves and they're going to say, Lisa, I was hoping you would be on time. That's something I want you to stop doing is be on time. Or they might say, stop worrying about other team members. They might say, be more productive when you're in this, or learn, stop focusing on this part of the business and start focusing on this. So whatever it may be. But what do you want me to start doing that I'm not doing? What do you want me to stop doing that I'm doing? And maybe there's nothing. What do you want me to continue doing that I'm doing well? And that is the magic question that you want to ask. What do you want me to continue doing that you like that I'm doing it? And the reason you want to ask that question is that is a perfect foray into your career path. And now you can ask the same thing your manager. Tell me a little bit about your role and responsibility expectations of me. We talked about start, stop, continue, and you've given me great feedback. But ultimately, my goal is to grow into the project manager role. Can you give me some advice on how to do that? When you started your career, what did you learn that might have been a unique differentiator in the market? Are there skills that you think I need to learn? By having this conversation, it's going to open up the conversation. By having this breakfast meeting, it's going to open up the conversation. And if you're doing it every 3 months, there's complete clarity. And there's nothing better than a good communication strategy. And if I'm telling you all my expectations and you're meeting them and we're discussing it every quarter, chances are you're going to get that compensation increase at the end of the year or at a certain time whenever they give promotions. So that is my recommendation on negotiating a salary when you're currently in a position, is make sure your manager understands what your expectations are, where you want to take your career, the type of position that you're interested in. Make sure you're asking your manager, what do you want me to start doing, stop doing, continue doing, that you'd like me to continue working on. And then even ask the question, my goal is to grow my compensation. I'm currently at 60. My goal is to get to 75 in the next couple of years. One, is that realistic? And two, what are your expectations, or what's your advice to help me get there? Then they know that, and then they can give you an increase as you move forward. The last slide before we open up for questions is, we talk a lot about compensation. And in all of my years of doing this, long time, obviously I left college in 1994 and have been working ever since. I have found that compensation does not solve any problems. Compensation is not the end all be all. People don't go to a company for compensation, and people shouldn't leave for compensation. I will tell you, these 3 bullets are the bullets that I live by. When I coach executives, this is what I tell them. Number one, first of all, you want to find a culture that you really enjoy, a culture that you like. So number one, Are you personally satisfied at work? You like going to work? You like the people you're working with? You like the environment you're working in? That's more important than anything else. Number two is, do you feel like you're growing professionally? So do you like the environment? Are you satisfied? Number two is, do you like the growth that you have? Are you learning new things? Are you learning new software packages or learning more tools? Are you going back and getting your MBA? Are they paying for a CPA class? Are they paying for training for you? So are you growing professionally? And number three is financial reward. Is that I believe that financial reward will come if you're a happy employee, if you're performing well because you are happy, and you're growing professionally. If the first two bullets are there, financial reward will follow. Every executive, every leader that I've talked to that left for compensation, I'm getting paid an extra whatever, is that they're typically, if they're not looking at the culture, typically they're eventually going to leave the organization because it's not tied to the culture. Compensation is not a driver. This slide you will use for the next 20 years in your career. Personal satisfaction, professional development, and financial reward. Follow those in that order is my recommendation. So, having said all of that, and there's a lot of information in 45 minutes, what questions do you have for me about any of it?
Again, please feel free to unmute and ask Tim directly, or if you'd like, please put them in any questions in the chat box, and we will get Tim to answer them. The floor is all yours.
Was it useful? Was it helpful? Anyone?
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. I do have kind of a question, I guess.
Please,
You talked about salary.com, about compensation and whatnot. What are your thoughts on BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, and I know Michigan has like different resources on their government website as well.
I think that's great. My only challenge with those sites is typically they're a little outdated and they're not market driven. I think the best, I guess, litmus test for a market is understand the positions that are being posted. So I think you'll get a better range from some of these internet websites by identifying the geographic location, but most importantly is the industry. If you find that the industry is growing, you will find that wages or compensation will go up. But I think labor statistics and the census and everything else are great, but typically they're a couple of years older than what the market is willing to pay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I find that often.
And that's my only challenge. Now, one thing that as you start your job search, and I'm serious, when I said identify 10 firms, try to interview with all 10 and get a sense every time you're interviewing for the same type of position, or even if you do 5 interviews, you can ask the question, can you tell me a little bit about the compensation range? Can you tell me how it's paid? Are there bonuses? Is there commissions? So you can get a sense for what the market is willing to pay based on those conversations. Does that answer your question at least?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. I just have, I guess I have another quick question. What are your thoughts on education sector, the industry?
What type of education?
Higher ed.
And what type of topic or what type of subject?
I'm just thinking at a staff level.
I think it's great. I think what we're finding is in certain cases, you're going to find that specialty subjects are going to pay better than other subjects. I think you'll find that for instance, teaching history is going to be paid differently than teaching calculus, as an example. That's why I was asking about the subjects. And I also think it's the school. You're going to find, and COVID has really flipped the educational industry upside down, is you're finding schools like Arizona State University as an example. It was ranked the most innovative school in the country, and they moved to virtual overnight. And it's because they moved to virtual because they also have an online program at Arizona State. So therefore, they were able to pivot. Tyler, I use the word. They were able to pivot right to a virtual environment very easy. I think universities like that pay more. I think they're looking for movers and shakers. They're looking for that flexibility. They're looking for those subject matter experts. And I think because they have the flexibility, you have the ability to negotiate a little bit better. So I think higher ed right now is a good spot. Now, the only challenge that higher ed is going to face is you also have the backlash of student debt. And you're going to have a lot of universities looking at their costs, their administrative costs, for instance. Like right now, if they do go virtual and schools are moving more virtual, do they need as many administrators on staff as they had before? So I think the pricing models are going to change a little bit because of those factors. But I think in geographic regions that are growing and schools, universities that are growing, I think it's a good sector to go into. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Tim.
Absolutely.
Tim,
What else?
I was gonna say, Tim, just being somebody who's worked in higher ed for 20 years, also add in public versus private, that the salaries that can go up and down just because of flexibility, public versus private.
Great answer, Tyler. I appreciate that. Absolutely.
Yep. So I do have a question from Megan Widener. Can you please recap about talking about the company's competition during an interview?
Okay, so so I mentioned 10 companies. So say for instance, and there's no magic to 10. So I want you to target a few firms in the industry that you want to work. So if you're targeting, say, 5 firms in the industry and you come in for an interview, they're going to ask you questions such as, why are you interested in this industry? Why are you interested in Atwell? Tell me about my company. I will ask that question. And again, I'm in the real estate industry. So we help companies like Pulte and Toll Brothers. So residential development, we help commercial developers like Walmart, Target, Lowe's. We also do renewable work. So we're in 3 major industries: real estate, renewable energy, and oil and gas. Well, the companies that you're interviewing with are probably in the same, but they're at least for instance, for us, we're in the real estate industry. So by me asking the question, what kind of industry you're interested in, it opens the window for you to say to the recruiter, I'm interested in the real estate industry. I've identified the top 10 firms I would like to work for. And inevitably, as a good recruiter, I'm going to ask you, who are the 10 firms? And you're not throwing it in my face. So be careful I'm interviewing with Kimley Horn. I'm interviewing with Stantec. I'm interviewing with CH Hill, which are all competitors of mine. You can simply say, I'm interested in these 5 firms. I've started researching them. I have a couple interviews with them. That is totally acceptable during the interview to bring up some of the competition. And it really shows your maturity. I think the students, young professionals that come into my office for an interview that come to me and say, I'm researching the industry and researching the top firms, I know they're serious. And it's not just to get a job. I hate when candidates say, I just need a job, because I don't want to hire you just for a job. I want to hire you because you like my industry and you've done research on Atwell, my company. And so for me, I think that is the perfect window to bring it up. And then again, you might bring it up during the salary negotiation. Based on my research, remember, I'm interviewing with a couple other firms. I really like Atwell. You offered me 50 grand a year. I was hoping to get closer to 55. That's how those two things play together. So that's totally acceptable to bring it up, not throwing it in my face, not saying I have a job offer if you don't, but talking about you having conversations with them or researching them is totally acceptable. Does that answer your question, Megan?
Got it. Great advice. Thank you.
Good. Perfect. What else can I answer? Well, this is my contact information. I know a lot of people don't like asking questions on these type of calls. Shoot me your resume. If you want to send me your resume, all that I ask is put in the subject line that we met in this meeting. So at the virtual seminar, and send me the industry that you'd like to work in, and maybe your top 5 or 10 firms that you'd like to work for. I will edit your resume. I will mark it up. I will send it back to you. If you have questions about compensation, by all means, I'm a brother. I'm here to help. If there's anything else I can do, I would be happy to do it. So just email me anytime. Other than that, thank you very much for joining tonight. I really appreciate it. And I hope to see you face-to-face at a lead event or the provincials this spring. Thanks so much. Thanks, Tyler.
Thank you, Tim. Everyone,
All right.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please keep up to date with other programs and offerings that we have at dsp.org/events. And don't forget about the upcoming virtual Grand Chapter Congress in August. Sorry, I had to think about that for a second. We will see you again at a future program. Thanks again for joining.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.